Hey guys, tonight we drift far from the familiar glow of city lights, out where the ocean breathes in long, steady sighs and the night sky seems so close you could brush your fingertips across it. You're here, barefoot on cool sand, and there's a carved wooden canoe waiting for you at the shore. Don't worry, you won't have to row though. To be fair, if this were real, you'd probably not survive the trip without years of training, impeccable balance, and the ability to tell time by the stars. But since this is a story, your arms get to stay pleasantly lazy. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And because I'm always curious, drop a comment telling me your location and your local time right now, just so I know who's awake with me under these stars. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step closer to the canoe, its polished sides smelling faintly of warm resin and sea air. A few carved spirals catch moonlight, looking like waves frozen in wood. The tide is gentle, more of a lull than a push, and the canoe rocks lightly as if beckoning you inside. The sand squeaks beneath your feet, a strangely cozy sound, like walking across a field of tiny violins that all chose the same high note. You steady yourself with one hand on the prow, and climb in. The canoe drifts almost on its own, as though the ocean knows you're here for something important.
Above, the southern stars scatter in brilliant handfuls.
It's different from the night sky you're used to. No familiar North Star, no Big Dipper. But the view is richer, like a book you've never opened and suddenly realize has thousands of pages you'll never finish.
You lean back against the curved wood and let the canoe carry you.
The water is black silk stretched wide, stitched with ripples of silver moonlight. If this were a cruise ship, there'd be shuffleboard and neon cocktails. Instead, you have the gentle slap of waves against the hull and the kind of quiet that makes your breathing feel like part of the rhythm.
Somewhere behind you, on the shore, the voices of ancestors stir.
You can almost hear them, chants whispered just beyond your comprehension, syllables layered with centuries of memory. The Maori believed that their ancestors guided them through chants, rituals, and stories, carrying wisdom across generations like carefully folded notes. Tonight, you're stepping into that world, whether you're ready or not. The first widely accepted fact: Maori navigators truly did cross thousands of miles of open ocean in canoes not much larger than the one you're sitting in. They used the stars, the color of the waves, the flight patterns of birds, and even the taste of sea foam to find their way. Imagine licking seawater and deciding, ah yes, we're about 2 days from land. Sounds absurd now, but it worked. A lesser-known detail is how lullabies in Zulu tradition sometimes contained warnings. While you might expect an innocent, "Sure, the baby's fine," the songs occasionally slipped in sly cautionary lines like, "If you cry too loudly, the owl might hear." A wink, really, a way of making discipline as soft as a feather. You chuckle at this, imagining your own bedtime songs ending with a dramatic "stop stalling," or the broom closet monster is awake. Comforting, yes. And also surprisingly effective. Historians still wonder if these practices arose purely from spiritual frameworks or if there was an observed, experiential understanding. That rhythm lowers stress, humming regulates breathing, song slows a restless pulse. Did they know, instinctively, what modern science tries to measure? That melody alters the brain's chemistry? Or did they simply, beautifully, trust that the vibrations of the human voice worked as a balm for unseen hurts? That question, like the song itself, doesn't need a neat answer. Someone near the fire holds a drum on its side, barely stroking the hide surface with steady taps. The sound melts into the lullaby, heartbeat beneath the melody. No harsh cymbals, no crashing dynamics, just the quiet repetition of a heart that has promised never to leave you stranded. It's funny, isn't it? In modern sleep apps, you can buy a subscription to hear rain or white noise on loop. But here, centuries before, there's no app and no marketing. Just neighbors who knew each other's voices by the second note, wrapping one another in sound during illness, grief, or fretful nights. You take a soft seat on the ground. There are woven mats, but you don't mind the earth beneath you. It's surprisingly warm. A healer motions toward you with eyes that seem to say, "You've carried too many thoughts today. Let them go." And then, without commentary, humming resumes. The song winds on. It doesn't perform for applause, doesn't worry about trends. It simply exists, shaping the night into something soft-edged and forgiving. You breathe deeper. You may not yet trust song as your medicine, but you can't deny your eyelids feel heavier, as if gravity has turned up slightly while no one was watching. The healer offers you a carved calabash with water. It tastes faintly earthy, cool as melted starlight. But really, the true drink tonight is sound, the subtle background chorus of insects, the quiet accompaniment of goats, and above all, the river of lullabies carrying you somewhere unseen. You don't move. You don't need to. The present moment has gotten surprisingly good at holding you exactly where you are. The fire has now burned down into a soft glow, no longer fierce, now just a bed of ember pearls spread across the ground. You stay still, watching the slow wave of orange flickers. Around you, the night thickens, not heavy or hostile, but like the warmest blanket that adjusts itself to your shoulders without asking. Somewhere, inches from your ear, a field cricket plays a note that lands so perfectly on time with your heartbeat that you almost wonder whether it tuned itself to you. Ahead, figures shift closer. They are the healers, the ones who translate illness into songs and weave spirits into harmony. They wear beads that glisten faintly in the low firelight. Reds, blacks, whites, each chosen as carefully as brushstrokes. A strip of fur brushes against a woman's shoulder, but the texture looks less like animal pelt, more like an old comfort blanket. It's decoration, yes, but also identity. These are not costumes but living archives, each string of beads telling stories of who trained them, which ancestors walked beside them, and even what dreams they once carried. You notice their laughter first. It bursts now and then, softly rolling like the kind that escapes during bedtime pillow talk, intimate, unpolished, and genuine. For healers, laughter isn't separate from medicine. For them, treating someone meant tending not only their body and spirit but their lightness of heart. Imagine going to a modern doctor who greets you with a knock-knock joke first. That's absurd, of course. Still, you suspect you'd feel better even before the prescription pad comes out. As they welcome you, you realize something. They're not magicians, not aloof prophets, but community anchors. They're translators, constantly balancing worlds, acting as interpreters between body and spirit, ancestor and present, sleep and wake. The healing process isn't sterilized behind doors. It unfolds here in the comfort of shared flame and echo. One healer places a hand on your shoulder, steady and cool. She doesn't ask what's wrong. She doesn't need to. Instead, she circles around you slowly, her anklets chiming lightly. Each step seems measured. You're reminded of how dancers in modern slow yoga classes move deliberately, never rushing, forcing distracted minds, like yours, to calm down or risk falling over. A fact takes root in your drowsy brain. In the Zulu tradition, healers often trained for years under mentorship. It wasn't an inherited title given idly. It was cultivated through apprenticeship, exposure to rituals, and even initiation dreams. Dreams held weight here, not the fleeting nonsensical montages you often wake up from and forget, but guiding messages believed to reveal the learner's path. Imagine explaining to your career counselor that your training plan involved waiting for the right ancestor to visit me at night. Honestly, it makes a resume sound way more interesting. Beyond the general knowledge, here's the quietly astounding detail. Sometimes the songs sung by healers were improvised. That means each illness brought its own musical prescription, one that might never be sung again in the same way. If your neighbor had a headache, their tune would be different than yours. A fever had a rhythm, a sadness had another. You can laugh at the idea of a bespoke playlist for every sneeze, but isn't it oddly touching? No two moments of comfort were identical, because each person and each pain deserved its own melody. Historians still wonder whether this improvisation was driven purely by creativity or if there were codified patterns, known only to the inner circles of practitioners. Could there have been secret cures of sound, passed down strictly by memory, like underground sheet music? Or was the true strength of the practice its adaptability, a refusal to bind healing into rigid formulas? We may never know entirely. What matters tonight is that their voices shift seamlessly, molding themselves into shapes your body hasn't realized it needed. The atmosphere thickens and relaxes. Shadows curl on the edges of your vision like they've decided to mimic songlines themselves. The healers do not question your being here. In fact, they draw you closer. You become less visitor and more patient, though your illness is nothing other than the weariness of living in loud times. A woman hums first, alone, sounding slightly off-key until another voice joins in, harmonizing the dip. Then a third voice laces above it, so thin it could pass for a breeze. The blend is low, steady, never aggressive. They are not performing, they're weaving. Each line pulls against the next with care, soft resistance and embrace all at once. It's not that you feel the notes resonate in the air. You feel them inside you, as if someone has strummed an instrument wired directly to your ribs. This is the moment you realize music doesn't just pass through the ears here. It's communal touch, the audible version of being rocked. Even insects fall into rhythm. The cicadas have politely adjusted tempo. If you tried clapping along, you'd instantly ruin it, so you just smile into the firelight instead. One of the healers makes a wry, half-whispered joke to another, and both chuckle. You don't catch the words, but you catch the ease. And that, too, is part of medicine. What's the difference between laughter and song, really? Both demand breath, both demand release, and both lighten the body. It dawns on you, you're being absorbed, not healed as in, you had a sickness, now it's gone, but as in, you had edges, and now they've softened. The world is not cut by clear perpendicular lines anymore. It's stitched, suspended, humming softly. And all this, simply because you met the village healers. The fire has relaxed into its lazy rhythm, coals exhaling slow breaths of orange against the black sky, and the healers' voices have grown steady, circling you like invisible threads. Tonight you're going to notice something strange and oddly delightful. To the Zulu healers, lullabies aren't just for babies. They're for you, for the fever-stricken uncle, for the grandmother whose knees ache by morning. They're as versatile as a roll of duct tape, though much prettier to listen to. One healer leans in, her voice soft, her song almost indistinguishable from the nighttime hum. The lullaby itself has just enough shape to keep you anchored, phrases that fall and rise like the tide, but not so much that you anticipate anything. This doesn't sound like your childhood rockabye tune looping endlessly. It's more like a repetitive chant where variation sneaks in just enough to keep the brain curious but not alarmed. It's hypnotic, like watching ripples repeat across a lake. The historical fact here is that lullabies weren't merely baby talk songs. They were teaching tools, lessons about behavior, warnings, reassurance, sometimes even mini-lectures about the natural world. A mother might lull her child to sleep singing about owls in the darkness, not to frighten but to instill attentiveness, even wrapped in a melody soft enough to settle the child's breath. Children grew up absorbing knowledge and rhythm all at once. And rhythm, of course, is its own kind of glue in the community. It makes people move together, breathe together, settle together. An overlooked quirky detail? Some lullabies doubled as subtle complaints from exhausted parents. Imagine hearing a parent sing, in the gentlest voice possible, "Please go to sleep, tiny one, or I might have to pass you to an ancestor right now." Not word for word, of course, but close enough in tone to be equal parts adorable and weary. It's proof that even centuries away, parents were still trying to win life's greatest impossible contest, convincing a baby to just sleep. Historians still debate whether these sleeping songs carried ritual significance layered under the tunes. Some argue the lullaby was more than family tradition, that it contained encoded prayers to ancestors, whispered charms against illness slipping into the body at night. Were these simple bedtime songs or spiritual contracts, reinforced nightly, woven in sound? Perhaps both. Perhaps none of us can peel the comforting away from the sacred, and maybe that's the whole point. You listen more closely now. One melody begins in the low register, resting right where your chest vibrates. Another trails delicately above, like breath frosting glass. Together, they overlap and loop, no abrupt jumps, no refrains demanding volume. There's no climax, only unfolding layers. You think of modern ambient playlists, the way they sprawl without a hurry. But here, it's performed live, intimate in a way a download never can be. The songs are tuned to whoever breathes nearby. Tonight, that's you. Your eyes start to wander over the circle. Across the flames, a child curls beneath a blanket of animal skins, drowsy but smiling faintly at the lullaby floating through his family's doorway. The tune doesn't only belong to him. It belongs to everyone listening. It stitches one household to the next, carrying softly across the village until the entire night landscape is cradled inside of it. Maybe that's the point. Lullabies here weren't private. They were communal ropes, tugging sleep into the village like an enormous shared quilt spread across every hut. Imagine a whole neighborhood collapsing gently into the same rhythm. No alarms, no sirens, no headphones needed. Just voices, rolling together, pulling sleep along as if it were livestock being gently herded into a pen. The healers watch you carefully, not for weakness, but for your breath. They notice how your shoulders rise and fall, whether your lungs ease or resist. Their lullaby pivots accordingly, slipping lower, slower, as if pacing alongside your drowsiness.
Even your heartbeat gets stage directions tonight.
One healer lets out a small laugh mid-song, reshaping the tune with a teasing little phrase tossed toward another singer. And instead of ruining the music, it makes it fuller, joy tucked inside drones. You chuckle at the absurd thought. Imagine Adele hiccuping in the middle of a ballad and her fans insisting it was the most healing thing she's ever done. But here, imperfection isn't error. It's personality woven into remedy. The ancestral layer here is important. Song connects the living to the dead. You're not just hearing voices from a circle of healers. You're hearing voices that deliberately invite echoes of older songs, carried forward without pages or recordings. Entire generations murmured into sound. The lullaby is less about the baby and more about continuity. You, in this very moment, are resting under thousands of voices hummed across centuries, every one of them gently rocking. It's soft, steady, undemanding. And you realize lullabies were forms of memory. Children may drift off before finishing a verse, but their bones would somehow remember. Even now, though you're fully grown and transplanted into this old landscape by accident of storytelling, your body recognizes the pattern as though you've known it forever. There's no need for diagnosis tonight. You don't need to tell them where it hurts or explain your worries. Their answer will be the same: listen longer. And so you do, allowing the sound to sink, no longer analyzing. Breath slows. Your internal tempo matches theirs. The healers croon on, unfussy, taking the weight you've been carrying and tucking it beneath their notes as though removing bricks from a backpack without asking permission. And though you've been promised countless remedies in your modern life, supplements, apps, tracking devices, it's probably safe to say none smell like firewood smoke, or glow under starlight, or hum against your ribcage like this. Which begs the question: were the healers right all along, singing lullabies not only because children need them but because, secretly, all of us do? You lean closer to the fire, warmed in spirit and skin alike, and the lullaby carries you that much deeper. No miracle claimed, no cure announced. Just song surrounding you like breath itself. The lullabies waver on the night air, and now you begin to notice how all the other sounds join in. You are no longer listening to healers alone. You are listening to the landscape itself. In this place and time, animals, insects, winds, drums, and voices all weave into something bigger than any individual musician. When your mind begins to feel restless, every sound seems designed to offer a counterweight, leaning you back into calm again. The earth beneath you is cool but steady, and your ears start picking up details. The crickets insist on playing their fiddles, a night bird releases a one-note refrain on endless repeat, and the fire hisses like a mild-mannered cat disagreeing with the wood. These layers pile in so gently that you can't point to where music ends and world begins. You realize this may have been part of the trick. Songs here didn't exist in a vacuum or a recording studio. They unfolded against the natural score of wind, river, and animals. The lullabies weren't dueling with their environment. They were collaborating with it. Unlike modern humans who sometimes wear noise-canceling headphones just to ignore the distracting world, these healers leaned in, using every sound around them as an extra instrument. The historical fact resting behind this is simple. Music and healing practices in Zulu life were never separated from daily sounds. They were performed in households, near fires, in communal gatherings. The village itself became part of the orchestra. It was expected that songs would blend with footsteps, bleats of goats, children's mutters, and the occasional spectacularly grumpy rooster. Nothing about this music was intended to be perfect. Its power came from merging with life. Here comes one of those overlooked details. Rhythm often followed the drum of the environment itself. Oral histories suggest that some healers imitated animal calls, blending them into chants not only for symbolism but for familiarity. Imagine being prescribed a chorus including owl impersonations instead of your usual pharmacy bottle. It might sound silly at first, but it made perfect sense. Those sounds were part of everyday life and therefore part of health. As you sit listening, one healer begins tapping on a wooden container, not rhythmically at first. More like he's politely knocking to wake the night up. Eventually it becomes repetition. Tick-tock, tick-tock, syncing with someone stirring the fire. The pattern settles into your chest until you cannot quite tell whether you are breathing to the beat or the beat is breathing you. Historians still wonder if these imitations of environment were conscious choices or unconscious, the way humans naturally match a rhythm if they hear it long enough. Perhaps some healers thought carefully about which sounds linked the sick person back to their surroundings. Or perhaps they hummed along without planning, and those around them mistook that natural mirroring for intentional technique. The debate simmers on in scholarly corners, but here in this circle you decide it hardly matters. What matters is this: the environment is cradling you too. The night wind has joined. It blows across grasses, creating whispery rustles that rise and fall like another verse of song. You lie back slightly and picture the sound like a blanket being pulled over the soil. You're covered by the lullaby, the grasses, the hum of insects, the patience of sky. That's a lot of coverage for one tired traveler. You lift your gaze and try tracing stars. Their stillness feels like percussion on pause, like the universe is keeping perfect time in silence. Between the stars, dark shapes hover. Trees, tall and watchful. They're part of the audience too, though they clap only in size of branch against night air. The atmosphere builds not in crescendo, but in density, like fog. You feel suspended in chords made of everything. One healer's drumbeat grows lighter as though it's being deliberately lulled into sleep. You can't help a small grin. Even instruments are dozing off. It's absurd, but there it is. The entire night is conspiring to soothe you. Have you noticed how quiet often makes modern humans uncomfortable? Turn off your device, and silence feels awkward within seconds. Here, though, silence isn't absence. It's instrument. It balances the rhythm, placing breaths between sound the way gaps are placed between beads on a string. You realize, suddenly, that every pause is as intentional as every note. You begin waiting for them, enjoying the hush as much as the sound. A healer notices the faint smile on your face and nods as though confirming, "Yes, you're finally getting it." The joke is that they don't speak it. You just understand. Their certainty radiates outward like gentle knowing. The overall effect is impossible to reduce down to any one phrase. It's not music, not chant, not environmental recording. It's the full fabric of your senses, woven, rearranged, tucked around you with care. You're swaddled in it. And strangest of all, what began as unfamiliar is now familiar. You don't just hear a Zulu lullaby, you hear your lullaby. The world composing itself directly for you, because you're breathing here. The night has folded itself neatly around you, not like something pressed and crisp from a drawer, but more like a blanket that's been warmed by a nap. It smells of smoke, grass, and faintly of herbs. You notice now that the healers have not abandoned medicine entirely for song. Scattered nearby are bundles of plants, knotted carefully with strips of fiber, tucked in pouches and hanging from belts. Yet the herbs aren't demanding center stage like an ego-driven actor. They wait patiently, as if to say, "Sure, we'll help," but the song is doing most of the heavy lifting tonight. You lean forward to sniff one. The scent rises earthy and sharp, something between sage and wet moss. The healer sees the curiosity on your face and chuckles softly, muttering words you don't quite catch. From the way she says it, you suspect the joke is something like, "Careful, don't inhale too deeply, or you'll be dreaming of cows trying to do algebra." Humor, again, is part of the treatment. It's impossible to forget that these healers valued laughter alongside song and herb alike. Here's your solid historical fact. Zulu healers, Izinyanga, did indeed use medicinal plants in their practice, some for digestive issues, others for fevers or wounds. Yet even then, plants were rarely applied alone. They were paired with ritual, rhythm, or song. The remedy was holistic, something modern people would classify under integrative health, but without conferences, PowerPoint slides, or essential oils being advertised at alarming prices. The quieter, quirky detail? Certain plants weren't even used for their pharmacological properties at all, but for their scent and sound when burned. One healer might throw herbs in a fire purely for the crackle it made, believing that the sound redirected restless spirits. Imagine if your pharmacist said, with total confidence, "Don't swallow this pill. Hold it between your fingers and listen to it rattle." That's the healing. Strange as it feels, the logic was there. Senses mattered, environment mattered, even tiny noises played their role. Historians still debate the balance here. Were herbs chosen first for their chemistry, the alkaloids and compounds modern labs can now confirm, or was the ritual weight given more importance than we realize? Both explanations hold, and perhaps the truth was never split that way. Maybe the leaf's bitterness and the song's sweetness were inseparable halves, neither powerful alone. Why insist on one real cure when you can hold both?
Your attention drifts back to the present moment.
A healer carefully lifts a small bundle of dried roots, lays it on the edge of the fire, and hums as smoke curls upward. He doesn't chant dramatically. This isn't theater. It's quieter, matter of fact, like someone humming while stirring soup. You smell the root, sharp at first, then mellow, leaving an echo almost like peppermint on your tongue though you never tasted it. Your chest feels oddly lighter.
Maybe from the herb.
Maybe from the song. Maybe from the way both trick you, gently, into slowing down. And that little trick itself is worth pausing over. How a healer never announced, "Now, you will feel better." Instead, they distracted you with scent, with a joke, with a rhythm, until, before you noticed, your body was rewiring itself toward calm. The healing wasn't an external force landing on you. It was your own body being coaxed into cooperation. One of the younger healers, clearly a novice, seems overly committed to waving a smoldering bundle dramatically, filling the circle with slightly too much smoke. Everyone coughs, laughing, and he looks bashful. The elder next to him pats his shoulder, reedy voice slipping into laughter too. Perhaps mistakes in ritual mattered less than the light-heartedness created by them. If your medicine makes everyone laugh until their stomach aches, then in a way, hasn't it worked? You find yourself smiling, even blinking through tears of smoke, and realizing how powerful this camaraderie feels. In a world without sterile isolation or distant specialists, medicine is social. Healing unfolds not in separate clinics but within the chorus of familiar faces, teasing voices, and at least one overenthusiastic herb smoker. The pouches dangle nearby, small charms tied to protect against wandering ailments. Some are filled with herbs, others with symbolic items, bird feathers, shining beads, even tiny bones. If you tip one in your palm, it makes a faint rattle, like seeds in a gourd. It's difficult not to imagine that sound as soft percussion in the night's larger ensemble. Everything, it seems, insists on being music tonight. And perhaps that's the essence. The herbs teach the nose, the charms teach the ear, and the songs teach the heart. Your body, deep down, understands all three together. Modern people often line up medicine, humor, and music as if they compete against one another. Science versus laughter versus vibrations. But here you witness how those lines dissolve. The smoke swirls and disappears into the stars. Your cough eases into a chuckle, which folds into a sigh, which lowers into an exhale so slow and steady you almost don't notice how relaxed you've become. And then comes the healer's grin. Mild, knowing, cheeky in its own way. With no words, they seem to say, "See? We don't force healing. We invite it." And you, soothed, realize you've accepted the invitation. The fire's circle has widened now, with more villagers drifting into the soft radius of smoke and sound. The embers glow not as a spotlight, but as a nightlight, focusing everyone's eyes without harshness, like the small orange bulb in a child's room convincing them the closet holds no monsters. You take a seat where you can see faces clearly. A group is forming, healers, elders, young ones leaning against family members, everyone gathering around the fire in expectation, but not nervous expectation. This feels like a nightly pulse, a ritual more ordinary than extraordinary, and therefore more comforting. The healer motions for you to lean closer, not to speak, but to listen. And tonight, listening doesn't just mean ears. Listening is body. Eyes for the flame, nose for the smoke, skin for the faint vibration of drums, heart for the voices. You weren't invited only to hear. You were invited to absorb. As you nestle down into the ground, one of the elders clears his throat, and with that simple gesture, a different tone begins. Where the lullabies had been intimate, hushed, and close, these fireside gatherings are slightly more public. Songs ripple out, meant to circle the whole group at once. Imagine it like the difference between someone whispering reassurance in your ear and a whole room humming along. Both soothe, but in different registers. Here's your grounding fact. Zulu communities often placed strong emphasis on communal gatherings around the fire, both for storytelling and for reinforcement of the cultural worldview. Healing did not happen in isolation. Around the crackling embers, chants, songs, and stories intermingled, fostering not only the mending of an individual but the strengthening of group bonds. Sleep, peace, and medicine became collective pursuits, not private contracts. And the quirky detail? Sometimes the songs sung at these gatherings were filled with humor, lightly teasing members of the family, joking about someone who pretended to be braver than they were, or praising the laziest cow in the village for finally deciding to move. Laughter blended into chant effortlessly. Nothing about the songs required solemn, straight faces. You struggle not to laugh out loud when one healer starts mock singing about his cousin's very noticeable snoring habit. Apparently, even back then, snoring was both unstoppable and entirely fair game for jokes. Historians, however, still wonder something about these communal rituals. Were the songs composed specifically for healing moments, or were they extensions of general storytelling traditions adapted for the sick and restless? Was there a separate doctor's playlist versus family jam session, or was the point that no line was drawn at all? The records don't answer. What you witness here tonight makes the question blur into irrelevance. The fire doesn't divide remedy from entertainment from tradition. It burns for all three. The singing starts to deepen, dropping into call and response patterns. One voice leads with drawn-out syllables, and multiple voices echo back like ripples across a still pond. You can feel the group lean collectively into rhythm. It has mass, like an invisible blanket dropping gently over everyone at once. The children begin to nod off one by one, slumping onto blankets on the earth, their small chests rising and falling in chorus with the grown-ups. It's oddly wonderful to see a medicine that doesn't need persuasion. When the lullaby begins, sleep follows obediently. Your mind wanders as you gaze into the fire, but your body doesn't want to wander anywhere. Each crackle feels precisely placed, each drift of sparks upward like a slow exclamation point. The embers pop softly, and you entertain the thought that perhaps even the wood's tiny protests are part of the medicine, the earth itself lending voices, as though saying, "Fine, you can burn me, but let me help the humans sleep while I go." Someone begins tapping a gourd rhythmically, a hollow knock that punctuates the chant with heartbeat clarity. You feel it in your chest more than in your ears. It tricks you into matching your breath with it, and once you do, you realize the trick isn't a gimmick. It's real alignment of physiology, the kind that modern science explains, but that traditional communities enacted without written journals or measuring devices. A playful interruption occurs when one of the goats bleats loudly at the edge of the circle. Without missing a beat, a singer slides that bleat into the rhythm, harmonizing with animal protest as though it were precisely rehearsed. Everyone laughs, the goat flicks an ear unimpressed, and the song continues. And here you realize it again. Nothing is outside the circle. Not the goat, not the cough, not the embers hiss. Inclusion is healing. What the night does now is wrap you in time itself. You forget your phone buzzing, your calendar of tasks, all the micro deadlines demanding attention. Here there is only one thing, the circle. It turns out no one is measuring efficiency in this ritual. The songs stretch on as long as the fire has breath left, and if that's ours, then so be it. Health, here, does not come on a stopwatch. You lean back, resting against the base of a log. The stars above you remain politely in place, the fire whispers upward, the chorus swells just enough to press your drowsiness down. And the thought flickers through. Isn't this exactly what bedtime should feel like? You, still awake, yet drifting, included without responsibility, healed without medicine swallowed, group laughter dressing wounds invisibly. And so you stay until your eyes blur, lulled by the gentle absurdity of living in an old world where goats provide backup vocals and community songs are the closest thing to a national healthcare system. The songs have softened now, tapering back into the lullaby range, and you notice how seamlessly they shift from the circle of the fire to the private glow of households. Here, sleep isn't considered a solitary inconvenience, it's practically a village project. So you follow a healer's outstretched hand and wander into one of the homesteads, a rondavelle with its rounded clay walls and grass-thatched roof arching above you like a nest. Inside, the space hums gently with voices winding into rest. Children curl up on matting, and at first you assume they've already nodded off, eyelids heavy, little fists clenched the way children seem to do when they're trying not to surrender to sleep. But then you hear it. The lullabies. Families are layering their songs inside the huts, just as the healers had layered chants outside. You realize suddenly that bedtime here isn't a quiet, lights-out command. It's an orchestra of families easing children into drowsiness with rhythm, repetition, and affection. The fact here is that in Zulu households, lullabies were viewed as essential bedtime rituals, not as extras. They transmitted both culture and security. A child wasn't simply soothed, he was also reminded of heritage, anchored in the community's language, imagery, and humor. And here comes your quirky detail. These lullabies sometimes included very practical lines, almost like whispered bedtime reminders. Lines teaching children to close the cattle crawl gate, or not to wander too far near rivers, could slip right into the verses. Lose interest in safety lectures while awake? No problem. The lessons will be installed while you're halfway to dreamland. Go to sleep. And please don't forget tomorrow that crocodiles exist. A gentle PSA wrapped in music. The question historians still debate lingers in your head. Were these lullabies deliberately educational, or did parents simply sing whatever was on their minds? Was it intentional pedagogy disguised as sweetness, or did exhausted caregivers find themselves blurting practicalities into melody? Either way, the result was the same. Children grew safe and soothed at once. The songs themselves are hypnotic in their structure. Unlike modern lullabies that rhyme neatly and attempt cheerful closure, these stretch on with looping refrains, words repeating until meaning slips and only sound remains. It's the perfect way to trick both body and brain into surrendering. You watch as a toddler's breath slows, chest rising evenly, tiny foot twitching once before falling still. The song continues after sleep takes him. It isn't about finishing, it's about carrying. One child insists she isn't tired, and her grandmother responds not with threats but with exaggeratedly long yawning notes sung so dramatically that everyone bursts into giggles. The girl laughs too, and then, inevitably, yawns mid-protest. In an instant, she's curled against her grandmother, face slackening, completely surrendered. Even the healers smile at this ancient trick. No stern bedtime authority, just musical sleight of hand. The intimacy of it pulls you in further. Imagine an entire neighborhood where every night, multiple families sing sleep into being, songs drifting out through thatched roofs to mingle in the air until the whole village is coated in melody. You think back to your own bedtime routines, maybe television in the background, or the faint buzz of passing cars. Functional, but rarely intentional. Here, bedtime is a ritualized gift. Another child, a boy about 7, tugs insistently at his father's sleeve. Instead of brushing him off, his father bends down and incorporates the boy's suggestion, a silly melodic line mimicking a barking dog. The whole room laughs as it blends surprisingly well into the existing song. There it is again, imperfection turned into medicine, childish play folded into ceremony until no one can separate one from the other. At this point, you realize you're sinking further into sensory immersion. The smoke clings faintly to the hut's walls, the songs pool like honey in the low space beneath the roof, and the warmth of bodies close together creates an atmosphere more soporific than any lullaby playlist on loop. You could swear the floor itself is swaying, or is it simply you? The healers remain quiet witnesses, occasionally adding their harmonies but mostly allowing families to lead. Because sleep was never just something a specialist delivered, it was cultivated by the people who tucked you in, who lived beside you, who wanted you to grow safely into tomorrow. Your eyes droop. The family doesn't mind. It's no insult to fall asleep during their song. In fact, it's the highest compliment. The lullabies are meant to be unfinished. They trail past the waking mind and tangle themselves into dreams, settling even where memory cannot follow. As your head sinks against the soft curve of the wall, you dimly note how strange it feels that this might be the very essence of what healing always wanted to be. Not flashy, not miraculous, not commodified. Just voice, patience, togetherness. 3 things the world never runs out of. And as the child's song slows into silence, you realize you are no longer a visitor looking on. You are in the lullaby too, carried in its current, waiting for dreams. The hut grows still after the last child surrenders to dreamland, and suddenly you notice something unexpected: the complete absence of sound. No hum of song, no bubbling laughter, no tapping on gourds. Just silence. It stretches so wide you almost flinch, as if your ears have stepped off a cliff. Modern life rarely grants anything as stark as this. Back home there's always the murmur of traffic, the thrum of an appliance, a notification buzzing somewhere. But here, the nothingness is total. You shift slightly, your own movement making the tiniest rustle. In this context, even the brush of your sleeve sounds enormous. You're suddenly hyper-aware of your own body, the faint hollow of your breath, the weight of your pulse in your eardrums. The healers let you sit in this suspended world, neither filling it nor apologizing for it. They treat silence as itself a tool, just as vital as singing. Here's the historical truth that grounds this. In Zulu ritual and healing, pauses of intentional silence were remarkably common. Stillness was a recognized form of communication with ancestors, a way to both respect and invite them. Silence wasn't emptiness, it was considered a vessel, carrying invisible presences. In healing rituals, that pause in sound wasn't neglect, it was the medicine breathing on its own. And now for the quirky little detail. During certain ceremonies, silence was deliberately paired with exaggerated stillness, with people even freezing in comically rigid poses for short moments. Imagine a healer suddenly lifting their hand mid-song and then freezing like a dramatic stage statue. Everyone would wait quietly, even the restless ones, until they moved again. A curious bit of theater, yes, but also immensely effective for resetting the atmosphere. Silence combined with physical pause pulled the mind into attention. Anthropologists long after noted this as ritualized stillness. You might call it the world's earliest pause button. Historians, though, scratch their heads and continue debating. Did healers believe silence carried spiritual energy of its own, or was its power entirely psychological, magnifying the effect of song by contrast? When the voices fell away, was it ancestors filling the gap, or a clever human instinct for tension and release? Either theory feels right when you're in it, but the true answer may never be known. For you right now, silence becomes its own kind of sound. Your heart beats loudly in your chest, but instead of feeling intrusive, it feels included. You hear the faint expansion of your lungs, suddenly realizing silence had created space for you to notice yourself. It's a strange mirror, without others' voices drowning you out. Here you are, breathing, unmissable. The healer across from you sits with eyes closed, her body completely still. She doesn't seem impatient. She doesn't need to entertain or fill dead air. There is no such thing as dead air here. The hush is alive, teeming with its own softness. You feel like you're sitting inside a cloud that has politely chosen not to move. What makes you smile, though, is the thought that silence here is not lofty or intimidating. It isn't that harsh kind of library quiet, where everyone glares at you if your stomach dares to gurgle. No. This silence is full of tolerance. It forgives your restless shifting, forgives the one sleepy child who sighs loudly in their sleep, forgives even an elder's sneeze that breaks the stillness like a drumbeat. Each imperfection only emphasizes how rare true hush can be. Slowly, you become comfortable in it. You sit still. And it doesn't feel like waiting for something. It feels like the thing itself. Modern ears, you realize, often panic at silence. We're used to filling it with noise, endless chatter, playlists on shuffle. But you discover here that it is in the very absence of sound that your body notices. How long your muscles have been tight, how frantically your thoughts have been sprinting. The gap holds them still until they release. Then, as gradually as dusk sliding in, the healer's voice returns, a low murmur blending with the quiet. It doesn't feel like a beginning. It feels like someone carefully stitching sound back into a cloth that had briefly been left loose. Silence has tempered the song, mellowing it, amplifying it simply by withholding it first. You lean further into the singing, not because it's louder or more insistent, but because you finally understand it differently. The hush lingers even when the song resumes, like a shadow behind each note. You realize that silence hasn't left at all, it just folded itself invisibly inside the new melody, carrying its weight like the earth carries roots you can't see. Your gaze drifts to the doorway of the hut, to the night beyond, where even the insects have scaled back their chorus.
The stars remain.
They give no sound, but their stillness is the loudest kind of reassurance. Not every presence must be noisy to be real. And so, with this strange new companion, this soundless sound, you sigh into the hush, and strangely enough, you feel more rested than you ever have before.
The silence lingers only for so long.
It's like the night itself refuses to let you drift too far without another reminder of why you're here. Soon, the hush is replaced by a new rhythm, a healer humming as she shakes a gourd rattle. The sound is sharper than the lullabies you've become used to, but no less soothing. It has a pulse that nudges your mind into remembering something. This isn't just a gathering of soft songs and jokes. Tonight, you'll see what happens when the stubborn illnesses, the ones that outlast herbs and laughter, are confronted in their own melodic fashion. A child is brought forward by his mother, his skin flushed, forehead damp with heat. The old woman fusses gently, adding layers of cloth and removing them again, as though the fever's fickleness could be solved by adjusting the child's wardrobe every 2 minutes. But this fever has proven persistent, so the healer steps in. She squats low, face close to the boys, and begins to hum in a register that vibrates in your throat just from being near her. It isn't a gentle go-to-sleep-now hum, it's a deeper, firmer melody, like the musical equivalent of saying, "All right, fever, you've had your fun. Time to head out." The fact that grounds you here. Zulu healers often combine chant, clapping, and rhythmic sound with herbal remedies to treat illness, especially when physical symptoms seemed linked to disturbances of spirit or stress. Music wasn't just for comfort, it was part of the treatment logic. The body, mind, and spirit had to be brought back into alignment, and rhythm was one of the levers they used. The quirky detail, though, is especially delightful. Certain fever chants weren't performed softly but with accompanying clapping and hand-slapping rhythms, the healer gradually speeding or slowing them depending on the patient's breath. An old account hints that if a child's fever broke at the height of the performance, the healer would joke that the illness couldn't keep up with the tempo. There's an image, disease standing in the corner, panting, while the villagers clap and sing it into submission. And of course, historians still argue about this. Was the chanting a spiritual intervention designed to chase away unseen forces, or was it early proto-medicine, a recognition that breath, rhythm, and communal reassurance actually do help regulate the body? Studies centuries later certainly show that rhythm breathing slows the heart rate, lowers stress hormones, even reduces fever. But did they know this, or did they simply trust that harmony healed without dissecting the how? The debate continues. Though sitting here under the smoky rafters, you find yourself less concerned with answers than with the way your shoulders unclench when that beat takes hold. The healer rises now, clapping sharply 3 times, and others join in. A circle forms around the feverish child, not restraining, but enclosing.
The singing swells, repetition running like water over stone.
The throaty hums layer with higher voices, while the clapping sinks and shifts as if the fever itself could be pressed back by invisible hands. The child moans faintly and tries to resist. But bodies sway, sound surrounds, and you notice his breath catching the rhythm, even unwillingly. Slowly, against his own little stubbornness, he exhales in time with the song. Gradually again, then deeper. Breath becomes rhythm. Rhythm becomes balm. You sit mesmerized, realizing how brilliant it is. Instead of fighting illness with bitterness or fearful ritual, they've created a pocket of play, of pulse. The fever becomes less an enemy and more a dance partner being led gently toward the door. And then comes the humor, of course. One man adds an exaggerated clap in the wrong place, drawing delighted laughter. The healer doesn't scold, she rolls the mistake into the rhythm, making it part of the game. Even the sick child laughs weakly, a little puff of sound, and almost immediately his shoulders relax.
You can't help grinning yourself.
Is this how you argue with fever, then? Not with codeine or cold compresses, but with laughter, song, rhythm, a community doing synchronized claps until the illness runs out of excuses? It's absurdly charming. The mother, meanwhile, strokes her son's face as the singing slows. She listens carefully to the crash of his breath against chance.
Still rugged, but calmer.
No miracle has dawned, but the atmosphere has shifted. Fear has been unfurled like a knot. The fever is no longer a looming monster. It's now a small trespasser in a room filled with guardians. You wonder if perhaps this is always the real trick, that illness shrinks when it is carried by many hands. Alone, fever is cruel, exhausting, frightening. Within melody and clapping, it becomes tolerable, even laughable, until the edges round off and the child once again belongs more to sleep than to sickness. Eventually, silence returns, brief but kind. The child dozes, leaning into his mother's chest, sweat drying like a cooling glaze on his brow. He's still fragile but no longer restless.
And you feel oddly triumphant.
As if you too helped chase fever back into the shadows, even though all you did was sit, listen, and let your own body lean with the rhythm. Healer would joke that the illness couldn't keep up with the tempo. There's an image, disease standing in the corner, panting, while the villagers clap and sing it into submission. The healer meets your eye with a twinkle that seems to say, "See? Sometimes singing is the only prescription strong enough." The feverish child is resting now, his mother rocking gently by the edge of the circle, and you sense a shift in the entire village mood. The demonstration, though full of rhythm and effort, has left behind not exhaustion but a curious buoyancy. The drum beats fade, the clapping subsides, and in the calm that follows you hear the faint exhale of relief shared by every chest in the hut. It's as if the illness itself has been politely escorted to the outskirts of the village and told never to come back. Though, like an impolite guest, you know it may try again. Still, for tonight, the healers have outshone both potions and poultices with nothing but song and community. You're struck by how little emphasis anyone places on individual heroics. Nobody thrusts arms into the sky and declares victory. Instead, the healers joke with one another, chuckling at missed claps, like musicians teasing each other after rehearsal. For them, the real victory is the peace that sneaks back into the room when laughter has reclaimed its chair at the fire. Here's a firm historical fact for you. While Zulu healers did rely on plants and divination, oral traditions emphasize that music, especially collective clapping, chanting, and dancing, was considered a more reliable balancer of umoya, the vital spirit or breath. Herbs could treat a body, but sound aligned the unseen energy. Which meant that, in many ways, song held the higher office. Words and melodies could call upon the ancestors and reassure the living at once, making them incomparable tools of care. And the quirky little gem hiding in this history? Sometimes people were given singing prescriptions. Instead of a jar in your hand, a healer might say, "Sing this chant each evening until your spirit lightens." Can you imagine picking up your modern prescription bottle and finding the instructions read, "Take this melody 2 times daily, preferably with a neighbor"? Not a bad idea when you think about compliance rates. Hard to forget a dosage when it comes with a catchy rhythm. Historians, predictably, can't resist asking questions. Some argue these musical prescriptions were never meant literally but symbolically, that what healed was the intention itself. Others argue the opposite, that rhythm altered breath, calmed nerves, and made them inherently effective treatments, even before biology could explain it. The argument survives in polite scholarly journals, where academics write with furrowed brows about things the villagers simply accepted as common sense. Humans are soothed by sound. Meanwhile, the atmosphere around you carries none of this worry about semantics. One of the healers leans back with exaggerated tiredness, earning a low ripple of laughter. A woman next to him plucks up a handful of ash, blowing it toward the fire to create a soft hiss. She declares, with a sly grin, "That's my potion for tonight." Everyone nods, amused. Her potions of sound are indeed proving more potent than ash in a calabash jar. And you think, isn't there a freedom in treating play as medicine? In refusing the idea that healing has to look grim and reverent? Even sickness here becomes an excuse for a kind of music festival where nobody buys tickets because everyone already belongs. Something inside you releases. You've been listening long enough to notice your own body loosening, the way your jaw doesn't clench, the way your shoulders have forgotten once familiar tension. You realize that you've been waiting for medicine to be something delivered. But here, it feels more like medicine is something contagious. Laughter, rhythm, sighs that pass through one throat into the next until you've caught it too. You lean back further. The earth is warm, forgiving. Someone begins another chant, but this one is slower, gentler, clearly more about shoring up peace than chasing anything away. The song flows with fewer words, leaning into long vowel sounds that stretch into the rafters like smoke. Each held note becomes its own sentence of comfort. You listen not for meaning, but for patience. Gradually you notice the absence of herbs. Not that they're gone, the pouches still dangle by the fire, but they just sit there quietly, neglected and unnecessary tonight. Why bother brewing remedies when everyone is already half asleep, eyes sinking under the weight of sound? Even the healers seem smugly aware. Their voices blur together, filling the hut with layers so rich you can't tell who is singing anymore. For a brief, strange second, you wonder whether medicine has always been this way. Less about the objects we clutch and more about the trust and rhythm we surrender to. The modern world prizes pills, but here you see that healing happens in the lean of body toward melody, in the rise and fall of group laughter, in the collective shift to calm breathing. The embers glow. The hut creaks softly in the night wind. And you, patient or bystander or dreamer, you can't tell anymore, are absorbed into the lullaby like ink into cloth. The room no longer needs potions. Song alone has become the cure. By now the fire has dwindled to glowing threads, barely a whisper of ember among the ashes, and your own mind has begun to follow suit. Still warm, still alight, but quieter, running lower, softer. The air has settled into that velvet space between night and dawn, not darkness, but a suspended shade where time itself seems reluctant to tick forward. This is the perfect moment to slip further, beyond herbs, beyond lullabies, and into what the healers whisper about most reverently, the landscapes of dreams. You ease onto a woven mat and let your eyes half close, because dreaming here isn't treated as a private mind spill of yesterday's leftovers. No, for the Zulu, dreams are journeys, bridges between earth and spirit. They mark illnesses, hint at remedies, or even hold messages from the ancestors themselves. That hazy drifting you're about to do? That was once considered its own form of medicine. Here's your historical anchor. Zulu healers long considered dreams significant not only for diagnostics but for guidance. Some even received their calling through dream instruction, visions of ancestors, or symbolic trials that would return night after night until the novice finally sought training. Rather than regarding dreams as meaningless static, they served as compasses pointing to health, truth, or purpose. And here's the delightful quirk. Some accounts suggest that dreams weren't just treated with solemnity. They were told and retold around fires, casually debated, with as much humor as reverence. Someone might recount a dream about being chased by an irritable chicken and find listeners giggling, nodding, and still searching for ancestral wisdom in the poultry cameo. For every solemn message, there was playful analysis. No symbol was too absurd to carry meaning. The open-ended historian's puzzle sits quietly beside you. Were these dreams seen as direct transmissions from ancestors, or as subconscious syntheses interpreted through cultural language? In other words, were you receiving a literal visit from your great-grandmother, or was your own mind cleverly dressing intuition in symbolic clothing? Scholars still swirl around that question. But here, under this roof of grass and smoke, the academic need for proof dissolves. Dreams, whatever their mechanics, matter, because people treat them as medicine. The healer now leans over you, placing a hand gently on your shoulder with the absolute authority of someone who already knows you're teetering on the edge of dream's door. She does not sing this time. She hums deliberately, low and continuous, a drone that lulls your body's edges until they feel porous, less defined. It's as though she's reminding you, don't fight sleep. It's the hallway to healing. You surrender further, eyes closed now, but the world remains translucent behind your lids. The village hum lingers, your heartbeat pairs with it, and the mat beneath you feels oddly alive. You're not quite asleep, not quite awake, which may be the very territory the healers believe in most. A voice rises in song, not for you specifically, but for those listening nearby. The words are stretching long, half fixture, half invitation. Chants that sound like they're rolling out a carpet toward the dream world, making sure the transition is smooth. Some villagers have already nodded off, and their sleep seems mingled with the chant rather than separate from it. Imagine the entire hut falling asleep to one shared dream, the way dancers move together without colliding. The healer by the fire lets out a chuckle at something said sotto voce, and the whole group ripples with a faint laugh before returning to quiet. Even laughter here slides easily into dream. It becomes less of a burst and more of a sigh. You find yourself smiling even as your eyelids twitch heavy. If dreams are meant to carry guidance, what better guide than joy to set your path? Now, here it comes. You slip into that halfway stage where your body feels too heavy to move but your imagination feels suddenly very nimble. You begin seeing things. Perhaps a meadow, perhaps the edge of a slow, winding river. Shapes come and go without obedience. The healers, watching you ease into it, keep humming, letting your mind do its wandering without judgment. They aren't afraid of this stage. They believe it's where messages arrive. They will ask about your dreams later, perhaps with both seriousness and sly humor.
You wonder fleetingly what your own dreams tonight might signal.
Will you meet a grandmother you've never known? Will a goat deliver unsolicited wisdom? Will a sky-scratching tree explode into blossom just to remind you not to rush? The beauty of it is that anything is possible here, and everything has value. Dreams are not dismissed as nonsense. They are invitations to explore. And as your body curls deeper into comfort, you realize something profound. Whether or not the ancestors directly tune into your rest tonight, the very act of believing in dreams as pathways gives them power. Faith alone smuggles healing into your subconscious. The hush returns, punctuated by faint hums and snores, the whole hut slipping into shared territory beyond reason. The healers themselves don't resist it. They lean back, letting voices fade, trusting that dream journeys are as necessary as waking remedies. And you are already drifting on the river they've opened, carried into landscapes you'll someday recount with both a grin and a sigh. You are floating now, as if sleep itself has unfolded beneath you like a riverbed carrying your body steadily downstream. Voices, hums, and even the crickets outside all begin to sound less distinct, yet more connected, flowing into one another until every tone seems to belong to the same song. The healers have not stopped their work, though. If anything, you sense they've only refined it, sliding from chants about fever dreams into songs designed specifically to balance what they call izunyanya, the ancestors, and your own restless spirit. Their voices braid together with careful intention, not simply for sleep, but to align each thread of your being with the world beyond you. Here's your grounding note. Zulu healers often believed sickness could stem from imbalance, between individual and community, between human and ancestor, between breath and environment. Song, therefore, had less to do with quick eradication of a symptom and more with healing the ties fraying between you and the cosmos. A sore body wasn't merely a body problem. It was a harmony problem. Balance restored by melody was balance restored in life. And the quirky little twist? Some of these balancing songs featured playful lines sung almost like riddles. They'd croon about a clever bird who outwitted a fox, or a child who found treasure only by tripping over it. Were these nursery rhymes, or encoded spiritual lessons? Perhaps both. The humor softened the ritual, reminding everyone that laughter itself could help stitch spirits back together. After all, nobody maintains harmony while scowling. Still, as usual, the historians hedge their bets. Were these spirit-balancing songs deliberate codes for transmitting theology, or were they spontaneous tales that happened to resonate with meaning later? Did people consciously craft them as ancestral contracts, or did they simply sing what felt good, chalking up the outcomes to sacred approval? Academic journals tumble on this question endlessly. Tonight, none of it matters, because the vibration in your chest convinces you harmony is being restored whether explained or not. The healer lifts her arms, and her bangles clink as she sways. The chant begins again, this time softer, as if blending the silence from before into voice. You notice a peculiar thing. No single voice dominates. Even the stronger singers hold back, leaving space for others. The entire hut is full of sound, yet no one is drowning any other out. Its balance you can literally hear. You glance sideways and notice the child who was feverish earlier now stirring slightly, cheeks cooler. His body seems to have willingly joined the music, surrendering without complaint. Harmony is contagious. Then another detail slips in. One of the novice healers mischievously sings a slightly absurd line about spirits who overslept their job. The laughter that follows doesn't fracture the gravity of the ritual. It completes it. Because balance isn't only solemnity. It includes joy, even silliness. Harmony that pretends sorrow doesn't exist will crumble. Harmony that denies humor is no harmony at all. Both are needed. The balancing ritual wraps around you like a weighted blanket. Each note lands with a kind of finality, almost like punctuation on a sentence you didn't realize you were writing. You feel your body adjusting, shoulders rolling back, jaw slackening, legs settling into a more comfortable sprawl. You didn't move intentionally. The song moved you. Imagine modern medicine venturing to prescribe, lie with community. Sing about forgetful spirits. Repeat until harmony restored. It sounds silly when you frame it clinically, but here it feels extraordinary. Why wouldn't this work? Breath slows, heart steadies, you feel less fractured. Isn't that the essence of medicine, no matter the delivery method? You sigh deeply, not for exhaustion, but for relief. The night air is cooler now, brushing against your face like a kindly hand. Stars gleam faintly through the hut roof where reeds part slightly, as if ancestors are peeking in, not spying sternly, but watching with interest, amused by songs that balance both inside and outside worlds. The healers close their eyes even as they continue to sing, becoming more like vessels than performers. Their melodies echo less like music and more like reminders. Remember you belong, remember your spirit is tied to every voice here, remember that nothing heals in isolation. The fire crackles faintly at your side as though underlining the point. By now, your body feels almost transparent. And yet, paradoxically, heavier too, sunk into the earth with trust. Balanced. Carried. Whole. And with that realization, you drift another step further into the dreamlike rhythm. You are no longer merely guest. You are participant, your own spirit quietly woven into the song of the hut. The night is running smoothly, like a record with no dust or scratches, and yet, as with all gatherings, there are always a few skeptics in the room. Not everyone, after all, is convinced that a song can heal stubborn fevers, soothe restless spirits, or chase off invisible ailments. And here's where the story takes a slightly droll turn, because even here, centuries past, skepticism is alive and well, keeping company with the healing chants. Across the fire, you spot a man leaning back with arms crossed and eyebrow permanently raised. The universal posture of, "I'm not buying this." He doesn't interrupt, too polite for that, but he gives the occasional sniff that tells everyone else exactly how unimpressed he is. A healer teases him gently, tossing his name into the rhythm of a chant, and the whole circle giggles. He frowns just long enough to maintain his image. Before cracking a smile he clearly didn't mean to let escape.
Even skeptics can't resist rhythm forever.
Here's your anchoring fact. In Zulu life, healers, Izinyanga and Izanusi, were widely respected, yet there were always debates among villagers about which heals best: herbs, song, rituals, or a strong constitution. Oral accounts sprinkle hints that even within communities, people questioned whether certain methods worked as much as everyone claimed. That's the mark of a thriving cultural dialogue. Participation didn't require blind belief.
And the quirky little detail.
Sometimes skeptics would poke fun even in ritual itself. A farmer might laugh that his wife's lullaby caused him more headaches than healing, or a grandmother might poke the fire and mutter, "If singing cured everything, my husband would have stopped snoring 30 years ago." These jokes didn't dismantle belief. Rather, they wove humor into the tapestry. Disagreement became not division, but another form of participation. Still, historians continue their debate as well, circling questions that echo into your ears even tonight. Did skepticism act as a foil to keep the traditions honest? Or did it simply mirror the natural diversity of belief in any community? Were skeptical voices crucial in balancing spiritual authority, exerting a kind of quiet accountability? No one can pin the answer entirely, but the evidence suggests these voices were not silenced. They sat by the fire like everyone else, arms crossed but still present, still warmed by the same glow. You watch as another healer addresses the skeptic by name in midsong, playfully, dramatically, as if the man himself were the illness being chased away. Everyone bursts into laughter. Even you can't help it, and neither can the skeptic, who groans but finally hums a few notes along, betraying his doubt with cooperation. His presence, once resistant, has now been folded seamlessly into the harmony. And there's something refreshing about that, isn't there? To see a community where disbelief doesn't make you an outsider, where doubt is welcomed into the circle, teased, harmonized, brought closer instead of pushed away. Healing, apparently, has room for dissent too. The healers don't take skepticism personally, nor do they stop their work to mount elaborate defenses. It's almost as if they recognize disbelief as part of the medicine itself. Healing isn't about crushing argument, it's about relieving burden. If laughter at a skeptic's expense, or at his reluctant participation, eases the heaviness of illness, then doubting Thomas has ironically helped more than he imagined. You start thinking about your own world, the way skepticism often breeds argument, and how this circle somehow avoids that fate. Here, doubt is gently teased until it hums along, insistence softening into play. And isn't balance, the very word once again, best served when opposites coexist? The skeptic eventually uncrosses his arms, sighs, and claps deliberately off-beat, earning groans from the children who instantly correct him. His smug grin suggests this was his plan all along. But doesn't that say something, too? Even the skeptic contributes rhythm, if only to highlight the rhythm's importance by failing at it. So the night pulls onward, skeptics and believers alike joined under one roof. And you realize, the true victory here is not about whether song is objectively medicine or not. It's about the astonishing ability of a community to absorb every position, earnest, doubtful, playful, into the same ritual fire, until nobody feels left behind. You lean back again, comforted not by certainty, but by the reassurance that even doubt can be healed simply by being included. The skeptic's reluctant clapping still echoes faintly in the air, but the mood has shifted once more, pulled by the current of the healers themselves. You realize something that delights you more than the songs, more than the herbs, maybe even more than the debates. The healers are funny. Not just incidentally amusing, but deliberately playful. For people holding the weighty responsibility of guarding health and spirit, they carry their role with a light touch, seasoning rituals with wit like cooks who know a meal isn't complete without a little spice. Tonight is no exception. A healer crouches by the fire, serious posture and grave face as though he's about to summon something profound, only to suddenly cough out a ridiculous imitation of the goat you heard earlier. The children laugh so hard one of them falls sideways, their blanket wrapped obnoxiously around their head like a turban of hilarity. The healer smirks, eyes gleaming, and then returns calmly to song as though the absurd interruption never happened. That's the thing, you don't distrust him for joking. If anything, you trust him more. It's medicine woven with humanity. Here's your grounding fact. Laughter was, and still is, considered essential in Zulu healing practice. It wasn't an optional bonus but a natural extension of restoring balance. Tension, grief, anger, illness, they all rose heavy in the body. Laughter pierced through them like a burst of thunder clearing a rain-drenched sky. More than comfort, it was remedy, loosening knots that chanting and herbs alone might struggle to untangle. And now, for your overlooked quirky detail. Some healers were known for inserting purposefully absurd lyrics into chants, lines about lazy cows, bumbling trickster spirits, or ancestors who forgot their shoes. Imagine chanting rhythmically about your illness while sliding in the phrase, "And now the sickness must leave, because even Grandpa's ghost tripped face first into the pumpkin patch." The laughter didn't dilute the ritual. It completed it. Joy was spiritual authority in its own right. Of course, historians wrestle with this too. Was this humor strategically inserted to break tension, consciously harnessed as therapeutic? Or was it simply the personality of the healers themselves, who refused to separate solemn care from daily play? Did they view laughter as sacred medicine in its own category, or just trust that joy heals without definitions? The debate lingers, but as you listen to the chuckling circle tonight, the argument feels academic in the most literal sense. You'd have to be in a university office to still be debating when it's so obvious here in real life. The healer beside you leans over and whispers something you don't entirely understand but delivers it with such exaggerated seriousness that you can't stop smiling. Evidently, you've been inducted into the tradition. diagnosed not with illness but with an urgent case of the giggles. Consider that your official inclusion in the ritual. The effect of humor is tangible.
The hat brims with it, louder bouncing off clay walls, voices high and low, like waves breaking in turn.
Even the grandmothers, dignified in their wraps, chuckle as they half cover their mouths. Joy spreads easily when permission is clear. You reflect suddenly on modern life, where humor and medicine often live in separate houses, perhaps even entire separate postcodes. Laughter is considered recreational, while healing is shunted into sterile seriousness. How odd, you think, how unnecessary. These healers know something utterly intuitive, that poking fun at a stubborn ache is sometimes the only thing sharp enough to dislodge it. The singing resumes between jokes, but the rhythm has changed. It's lighter, playful, as if every verse is daring you not to smirk. One healer makes dramatic hand gestures, another pretends to conduct the chorus with a stick, drawing applause from the children. It's less ritual now and more like bedtime theater. Healing as comedy, why not? And then you have the absurdly perfect thought. Maybe laughter is their unspoken proof. Because in this hut, surrounded by smoke, songs, skeptics, and goats-turned-comedians, absolutely no one looks weary. The frowns have lifted. Fever has softened. Shoulders have dropped. If health is measured in release, then the punchline is the prescription. As the fire cracks another joke of sparks, you sigh with unusual satisfaction. The healers have cured the heaviest thing in the room, not by crushing it with laborious ritual, but by prying it open and letting laughter tumble out. You lie back, still smiling, body finally convinced it has permission to relax. The medicine tonight hasn't been something you swallow or apply. It's been something you laughed at until it let go of its grip.
Medicine through humor, remedy through joy.
A final chuckle escapes, faint and drowsy, and, for once, you fall asleep mid-joke. The last of the jokes settle into echoes, trailing off like little sparks that fade but leave a warmth long after they've gone. Around you, the night has hushed again, and the only sound is the occasional snore, one stubborn villager sawing logs with such volume you're surprised the ancestors haven't come down to file a noise complaint. The fire is all but ashes now, still glowing faintly, like the final on a sentence that was never rushed but simply needed to come to a halt. You stretch out on your mat, and suddenly it feels as if the earth itself has decided to cradle you. It isn't just sleepiness, it's that drowsy confidence you've gained from spending the night among healers who see lullabies, laughter, and silence not as extras, but as essentials. Here, illness is held down by rhythm, fear is measured in laughter, and rest is something sung into existence night after night. Healing is not a rare miracle. It's routine, as ordinary as breath. The fact resting closest to you is this. In Zulu tradition, healing practices were community events. They wrapped song and ritual around those suffering, uniting private health with public care. A sick child was not hidden away but attended to with voices, jokes, chants, and rhythms that made everyone participate in their recovery. To fall asleep in a lullaby was to be woven into your people. And here's the sweet detail you tuck into your dreams. Lullabies were offered even to adults. Exhausted laborers, grieving widows, weary elders, all might be sung to late in the night. Everyone, it seems, deserves to be cradled, no matter age or burden. That part makes you smile, because you are being cradled too. Scholars still debate whether healing by song was effective in measurable ways. Was it placebo, psychosomatic, psychosocial? They chase categories in libraries far from the warmth of fires. But another truth whispers louder here. Whether you believe in ancestors bending close, or in rhythm adjusting heartbeats, or simply in the unbreakable comfort of community, what matters is it works.
Not as miracle.
As presence. The healer who guided you first now sits back, eyes reflecting embers, as though quietly checking that you've settled. She doesn't look burdened or triumphant, just calm, like someone who knows that healing is less about climax than continuity. You sense the night is finishing, yet it doesn't feel final. More like a soft good night that expects the story will continue tomorrow, and every tomorrow after. You yawn, dizziness wrapping pleasantly around you. And then, like every child in the hut, you surrender.
No resistance, no stubborn protest.
Just breath slowing into rhythm, laughter now tucked inside of you like medicine stored in the bones. The healer would probably joke that if you dream of goats doing stand-up comedy, you'll know the song worked especially well. Either way, you are drifting into the same starlit silence, wrapped by lullabies, protected by both human and cosmic voices that whisper. Rest is the most sacred cure. And so, under the canopy of an African night, with healer's medicine hanging in the air like perfume of song and smoke, you are carried, completely, into sleep.